With the midterms on the line, let's bring in MS Now senior White House reporter Vaughn Hilliard. Rohit Chopra, the former director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, who now heads up California's new statewide consumer agency. Wall Street Journal national politics reporter Sabrina Siddiqui, and MS Now political analyst and Boston Globe columnist Kimberly Atkins-Storr. It is good to see you all. Vaughn, tell us about the conversations that Trump's team is having with GOP candidates right now.
Right. Jake and I had numerous conversations with an array of operatives helping Trump and the national GOP essentially make their calculations with Senate and House Republican candidates around the country. And the calculation here 3 months out is that Donald Trump is going to say whatever he feels like saying, as we have grown accustomed to, whether it be the ballroom or cheering on tariffs or cheering on the bombings of Iran or calling the American economy the golden age. But that is different than the national strategy that his own team is setting up for those down ballot candidates. And that is much more focused on key provisions of the One Big Beautiful Bill, we're told, including, for example, tax cuts, increases to child care tax credits, increase on SALT deductions. Those types of provisions that generally poll well with Republicans. The issue is, and we'll see what the president does in Detroit later today, is that the president it doesn't really echo that message himself. And what our reporting is showing is that there is more leniency being given by Trump operatives and national GOP operatives to candidates like Mike Rogers, the Senate candidate in Michigan, Susan Collins in Maine, and House candidates that are vulnerable Republicans or trying to win seats here that effectively they don't have to. It's not about saying go out and speak out against the Iran war and Donald Trump, but essentially it's okay if you sidestep that issue, because we are told by multiple sources that if you're talking about Iran, you're not in a good situation, and they understand that polling does not show the president's economic decisions on good footing. And so with that understood, candidates can effectively go their own way.
Vaughn, I just want to make sure that I am understanding your reporting, because I understand that his team is trying to insulate candidates from the Trump attacks. Does Trump know that they're doing this? Is he on board? I mean, how much of this relies on his team being able to keep any of these attacks, any of this distancing from their boss?
I'm glad you're asking that question, Alicia, because I think it's a really critical one. Is that this is happening effectively separate from Donald Trump himself, that his apparatus understands what it takes to win these Senate and House races, and that Donald Trump, unlike last election cycles, over the last 10 years, right, he's been surrounded by people that have effectively kept him posted about how he can consolidate power within the Republican Party, and that anybody that crosses him or questions his policy decisions, he's effectively gone and put out tweets or True Socials or goes on the campaign stage and derides them. That's not happening this go around. We're told by one strategist suggesting that there's less paranoia, that effectively the candidates are being given that space and they know that they don't have to anticipate getting lashed out. Tom Barrett is vulnerable Republican in Michigan, 7th congressional district. That's actually where Donald Trump is visiting today. And just last week, Alicia, he voted for that Iran war powers resolution to pull back the war authorities that the president has. Well, guess who's going to be on the stage today and speaking alongside Donald Trump, and who hasn't been blasted by him or his political operation? Tom Barrett. So these are interesting dynamics. How long will they last? That's the question. But for now, his operatives want it to last as long as they can.
Right, Sabrina, I would argue it is the question. It's telling to me also that they have the president on the stump visiting battleground states, touting his economic agenda, even though he has consistently mocked the term affordability, downplayed rising gas prices, not to mention he previously flipped off and mouthed an expletive to a Michigan auto worker who was heckling him during a January visit. Why send him back to a state with one of the most critical primaries in the country?
Well, I think that you have a situation where the White House has repeatedly heard from Republicans that they would like to see the president much more focused on the economy. And Vaughn brought up a really important point that oftentimes President Trump's messaging or rhetoric does not reflect the reality that Republicans are countering each and every day as they are trying to defend both control over both chambers of Congress. I mean, poll after poll has really shown one consistent theme, that Americans are souring on President Trump's economy faster than any other point in his presidency. And we had inflation reach a 3-year high in May. The president on tape at the time saying he loves it. So it's not just that Republicans are defending a struggling economy in November. They're also defending an incumbent president who has repeatedly shrugged off the concerns of voters with respect to everyday costs of living. And, that has really been at the center of all the polling, that the top priority for voters is the economy. It is inflation and affordability. So, you do have the president going out on the stump, but I think the big question is, what is he going to say when he gets up there? And is that going to make life any easier for Republicans who are trying to distinguish themselves, even if that's a lot harder to do when you have had control over Congress and theoretically could have been in a position to change the trajectory of the economy?
Right. And Rohit, how much of that is going to be tailor-made to the state he's in? Because while the economic headwinds are national, there are regional specifics. Michigan could very much feel the sting of these new Canada tariffs. What should people know about those impacts? What do you expect to hear from the president?
Well, I think Sabrina is right. What is he actually going to say to make anyone think that things are going to get better? We have seen no real strategy whatsoever when it comes to the war in Iran. They said it'd be a few days. It's been 5 months, and every day people are paying the price at the pump. And then, of course, when it comes to tariffs, we know there really hasn't been a strategy. They also said that they would be short-lived, and he promised that all these manufacturing jobs would come back all across the country, and they just haven't. So I think what you're going to see today maybe is a lot of ranting about and non sequiturs rather than actually talking about the cost of groceries, about the cost of gas. And frankly, we are now seeing it in the data. People are struggling more on credit cards. Mortgage rates are going up, making housing even more expensive when you borrow for a home. So there is not a good story to tell. I'm not sure what he's going to say, and I'm not sure people are really going to care.
Kimberly, yesterday you had House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries kicking off Democrats' closing pitch for midterms dubbed Fighting for an Affordable America. Jeffries seized on Trump's broken promises on the economy. Take a listen, and then we'll discuss on the other side.
They told you they'd stop spending money on stupid wars in the Middle East. They promised to bring energy prices down by 50%. And get gas below $2 a gallon. MAGA Republicans can find money for Donald Trump's reckless war of choice in Iran. They can find money for his king-like ballroom. They can find money to unleash ICE brutality on American citizens and law-abiding immigrant families. But when it comes to making your life more affordable, the cookie jar is empty.
Okay, so here's the thing, Kim, which is we're going to hear some version of that from Democratic candidates for the next few months. If I am understanding Vaughn and Drake's reporting correctly, then what Republican candidates are now sort of freed up to do in some of these more competitive districts is to say, well, I don't agree with all of that. I'm not sure that actually buys them enough distance from this president to win in a midterm election.
That's exactly right. I mean, usually in midterm elections, they tend to be referendums on the current administration, the party currently in power. So on top of that, you also have the affordability crisis, President Trump's terrible message, basically saying that he doesn't care about it or doesn't believe it even exists. And you have it essentially handing Democrats their messaging right now. So I don't think distance will be enough. But even though they are distancing themselves from Donald Trump and his messaging still has them in a bit of a chokehold, particularly in states with really big midterm contests like Michigan. It's a battleground. He's speaking in Oakland County today. That's where I grew up. The voters there have a very good BS meter. They also understand affordability. They understand manufacturing. They understand jobs. And they want candidates to speak to them straight and deliver. And when you don't do that, they are not afraid to vote, to give to throw the bums out, if you will. And so that sentiment is working against Republicans in that state at a time that they're trying to pick up crucial seats to try to hold on to that majority. I think Donald Trump just being there, likely going to go off on a rant about stolen elections or something, is not going to be a good look. And just one final quick point. In Detroit today, a major international thruway is opening, the Gordie Howe Bridge, which is a collaboration between the U.S. and Canada, where in any other timeline, the U.S. president and the Canadian prime minister will be standing on that bridge celebrating that. Trump isn't going near it because he did everything that he could for his own political reasons to keep it from opening. People in Michigan know that. So him being there is nothing, I think, but a hindrance to Republicans in Michigan today.
Kim, I got to say your BS meter is one of my favorite things about you. And so now it is nice to know the origins of it. Rohit and I are from New Jersey, so we also pride ourselves on our BS meter. And I think Kim brings up an interesting point, Rohit, right? Which is there are opportunities that are being missed. If you had an administration that said, OK, we have a midterm challenge between now and November, what can we do to get the economy back on track? What would they actually be doing, Rohit? What would they be focused on?
Well, you really want to focus on what people are spending on. And again, I think there is a lot that could have been done when it comes to energy prices. You see in California is trying to make sure that China is not totally checkmating us on electric vehicles. There could have been so much more to diversify the energy base so that we weren't dependent on a shock from Iran that is pushing up prices. When it comes to housing, Congress actually passed a housing bill that would help make housing more accessible, and Trump didn't even want to sign it. He just ignored it until it became into law. This is really a sign of Washington that is not focused on what people are actually trying to afford. But you know what? Maybe it's all working because the people who are profiting, big oil companies and others, they are laughing all the way to the bank.